berthyn i'r gymuned yn Llanberis, mae o'n rhywbeth unigol dwi'n ddarganfod.
Dwi'n meddwl bod o ddim tan ti'n kind of symud I ffwr, bod chi yn dall faint o lwcus oeddech chi I tyfu fyny rhywle fel yna.
You can be a bit weird and strange and feel settled within North Wales. It's a bastion for the weird and the strange.
All these people that are of a different generation as well that are still climbing so well. A lot of them choose to hang around here, and they always have done.
North Wales is about the rock imbibing human beings and making them joyful.
It has the best adventure trad climbing, I would say, in the world. I wouldn't just say in the UK. I would say it has the best adventure trad in the world.
Mae 'na gymaint o characters sy'n byw fyna sydd yn... Maen nhw gyd yn dod efo'i gilydd I llenwi'r lle, I bod yn lle hapus ac exciting.
Bunch of fucking weirdos. Absolute weirdos. Misfits, ne'er-do-wells, characters. You know, climbing attracts those people, but everybody seems to come through Llanberis at some point, you know.
Come on, Nick! Go on! Oh, bless you!
I think North Wales is just one of those little hotspots of amazing mountain trad in particular. And there's still really hard lines being climbed high up in the hills, and I think that's really exciting.
I think Wales is a contender for the best in the world in terms of the community that it's got here and the variety of amazing climbing.
It's got the most diverse types of rock in a small area than anywhere in the world. Now, that might be fake news. You might have to fact-check that, but I think you'll find it's right.
North Wales will always be a fantastic place to go and enjoy the routes that everyone's done from different generations, because they're totally fantastic.
Fy enw I yw Zoe Wood, ac nes I tyfu fyny yn Dinorwig. Nes I mynd I ysgol yn Llanberis.
Enw fi di Lewis.
Thanks, Zoe.
Lewis, dim Lewis. Dwi'n gwybod bod yr pobl sy'n wylio sydd ddim yn siarad Gymraeg, dyn nhw ddim am gallu cael yr enw yn iawn. Lewis ydi o dim Lewis. Felly, dwi'n byw yn Llanberis. Ac dwi'n hollol mewn gared gyda fy nghartref. I got into climbing because I was always scrambling around on things. And Mum decided that I should probably give climbing a go. So she booked some lessons. And it was there at the wall that I ran into people like Pete Robbins, Rachel Robbins, you know, Calf. And so they took me under their wing, took me climbing outside for the first time. And I thought that was just so brilliant. I want to do it again and again and again.
Rhwle lle maen nhw gyd just yn playground massive. Dwi'n cofio pan oeddwn ni'n plant bod gael mynd I wneud ras mynydd. Oedden nhw'n rili fach, ond oedd yna wbeth rili special am rwy'n mynd fatha go, a wedyn chdi gael rhedeg I mewn i'r mynyddoedd. A doedd yna ddim oedolion na'n byd hefo chi, ac o'ch chi jyst yn teimlo yr sense of bod yn free ac yn wild. Ac just gallu bod tu allan am rhan fwyaf o'r amser yn yr ha. Mae jyst mor da I chi.
Mae'n rhoi cysylltiad i'r tir, ac y tir ydy un o'r pethau fwyaf barddonol amdan Cymru. Gwlad y bardd, gwlad y gân ydy o. Ag mae hyn oherwydd da ni mor falch o lle da ni'n byw. Ag mae dringo jyst yn ffordd arall i teimlo'n agos i Cymru.
There's so much good climbing that starts right at the base where you'd want to start your learning, all the way to the more extreme stuff that this is the perfect place to build that kind of, to build your mind game here.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why there were so many early routes here, because they are like places like this.
North Wales is, I think it's the home of the spirit of climbing, without a doubt.
Drwy'r byd yn grwn, does na ddim creigiau hŷn ar hain. Yma'n swrth dan gwrlid y cymylau.
There's no doubt that early man was quite a capable ascensionist of the cliffs. And it's much more of an indigenous thing than is generally accepted. There is very little doubt that it was copper miners from Nant Gwynant who first climbed Slanting Gully on Llywydd before the earliest recorded climb in Britain. And it's a fabulous feature as well. It's a huge feature in the cliff. And this was the cliff that all the educated Englishmen of the time flocked to climb, and they stayed in the Penigwrdd.
The Victorian climbers used it for training for going to the Alps on stuff like Llywydd, and days on Cloggy, and training the skills on Tryfan and these smaller mountains before going for bigger stuff. Hence in the Penigwrdd Hotel you've got like the oxygen tanks that they were using on Everest.
They made their name as the great pioneers of mountaineering in the Alps and in the Himalayas, but these Welsh workmen had beaten them to it on their home ground by a considerable margin, so give them credit, I feel.
In 1921, Pat Kelly got all the wives together of all the prominent climbers, and the wives were, climbing in their own right. They did really, necky things with no gear, but the whole ethos of wanting to promote women's climbing and trying to make women more independent is just so forward-thinking. It was amazing that it happened.
I mean, maybe it's a slightly controversial thing to say, but even though the women who set up the club in the 1920s were pioneers and libertarians, really, as well, it was only those women who could blaze that trail. They were in that position of privilege which allowed them to be able to be the trailblazers, where we can all benefit from them opening up climbing to be something that women could do.
It's the nice thing about having the first ascent in the guidebooks. You look down at the date, and you're here 50, 60 years later, and it takes you back into what it might have been like to have done it then.
Well, it all started for me in the council house in Llanberis, where I was born, in the 50s. In the old days, children were kicked out the house on weekends, in the evenings, on holidays, and we were just roaming around, and climbing rocks became an activity, a natural activity. And then when the first wave of climbers actually settled in the 60s, people like Joe Brown, when he opened his shop, I was quite aware that this guy was one of the best climbers in the world.
In the shades of thinnest from the luckless leaders fall. The corner of it was towering high, and Joe uncommon small. But his heart was big as the mountain, and his nerves were made of steel.
If I went up the pass in a car, I'd see climbers on the rocks, and I was fascinated. And I remember thinking with Joe Brown whether he could actually climb Pebble Dash like I had on the side of the council house. whether he was that good. You know, we had no relation to climbing, proper climbing.
If you were going to think of somewhere where there's that volume of crags that are just going to make sense to be good climbing, you think of the pass. It's so close to the village, and you're just surrounded by these two walls. The Cromlech, just as a feature, is quite striking when you drive up and down the pass.
Cromlech is a strange one. It's so different to any other rock in the pass, I find. And even on either side of the corner, it's like almost like two different crags.
So we're at Dinas Cromlech in the Llanberis Pass, and we're about to do an absolute classic called Left Wall.
It was done in the 60s, I think, which was maybe even early, maybe the 50s. And back then, there was an ethic of the leader must not fall off.
You never, ever intended to fall off. If you fell off, your chances were that you would either be injured or dead.
And they climbed it in big boots, using railway nuts as protection.
And my DMM draw.
My DMM draw.
Oh, yeah. Just growing up in the climbing world, you hear so much about Dinas Cromlech, and Left Wall and Right Wall are just so iconic.
Post-war, everyone's that very tough mindset. Joe Brown, Don Willinson, and people putting up amazing routes, you know, like Cenotaph Corner, Cemetery Gate, these huge, incredible lines that are fearsome looking, and they're fearsome looking when you've got a decent new rack. When they were doing them with next to no protection and just, you know, a couple of pegs so you could maybe wobble in here and there and round the waist relays, it was a really incredibly bold achievement.
You used to climb with a balaclava on with pebbles stuck inside it. You had to find the right pebble. Having found it, you then had to thread a sling.
The play that the climbers brought was entertaining and radical, and the devil-may-care nature of it. And that still appeals to me a bit, but I can't do it anymore, so I shall just have to hobble off into senility and be jeered at by my son.
I really like the scene that we have, you know, we've got lots of young people that are keen and, yeah, I suppose rebellious. Won't be put into boxes anyway.
I don't know, I wouldn't say it's that rebellious though.
I guess there's not quite as much to rebel against in climbing because it's not quite as counterculture anymore.
May the 3rd, 1979, Mrs. Thatcher elected, the Tories came to power, and Britain became thereafter a fascist state.
When I'm asked for a detailed forecast of what will happen in the coming months or years, I remember Sam Goldwyn's advice. Never prophesy, especially about the future.
4 million people unemployed, and it was full-on economic deprivation.
The 80s, there was a language, an omnipresent language of fuck off.
I would say in the 80s, politics and climbing and like the anarchy and whatever was probably a big, I don't know, maybe I'm talking shit. Because maybe people like Britch and Johnny Dawes and maybe they just wanted to go climbing.
People didn't give a shit. They're not interested in the government. They don't give a shit. Piss off.
The 80s were nuts. You know, when Niall Hughes made that movie in 1980s, The Birth of the Extreme, he wasn't kidding.
Cheerio, man. Goodbye. Whoa!
Host of people lived on the dole, couldn't find any work. And that's when the hard climbing started in the Genoa quarries, especially.
We knew John Redhead, and we used to see him because he was developing the quarries, and he'd say, God, we've just done this route and that route, you've got to get there.
JR's and Ron's routes of the 80s are just impeccable routes. And people now are good enough, they should be doing them in the wet.
When I became better at climbing and I could start climbing some of John Redhead's routes, oh man, they were like masterpieces. You know, it's so obvious he's an artist and he's creative because his roots were the same and they were just... And I would be awake at night thinking about John Redhead routes and trying to climb them and hopefully not fall off them.
I've always been non-servient to the system. My climbing came from not being subject to social conditioning. Out! Like in the 80s in particular, you climbed from your heart. You climbed. I'm not saying climbers don't do that now. I'm sure they do. But I'm saying generally, in the 80s, there was an anti-establishment.
Standards advance, but boldness probably doesn't. You know, that mad streak that's in some people, there's only a certain level. You can't really push that level. You can push your physical ability, but not that level of madness or sheer joy of risking your life.
Doesn't matter how hard you train. If you're going to die, like quite easy moves can feel really hard. Whereas in the 80s, there were just an astonishing amount of climbers willing to really stick the neck out, just because that was what you did.
That was a great time, but maybe romanticised now because everybody was really poor.
You could get by on very little, and I think part of that again comes back to that your aspiration and people around you didn't have a lot. So everyone was in the same boat. And if someone had a car, then obviously they were very popular.
I used to just have Johnny Dawes drive me everywhere.
You know, I was money because my parents had a big manor house and stuff, and I learnt to drive in a Ferrari. So I arrived in the climbing scene with loads of money. So I used to drive people around, and they would do the shoplifting or whatever was required. Or I think shoplifting's pretty harsh, really. But if you're running the shop, it's not what you want, is it? And I do get that.
That was one of the purple patches of UK climbing indoors within his heyday, 86, 87. The routes that he was putting up were really outrageous in the climbs.
John is a showman, he's fantastic. And I thought, bloody hell, I got to make a film with this guy. I met him in Pete's Eats and I said, come on, let's have a go. You climb, I'll film. How many times can you do it? He said, 3. I said, you sure? He said, yeah, it's a full body pump, but I can do it 3 times.
Okay, Paul.
And that's what he did.
I'm much better than people could, understand. I'm a much better climber than they realise.
Possibly the best climber in the world at the time, certainly on that technical build style, in his flamboyance, and also captured North Wales.
A sense of becoming was something that I really liked the idea of when I was younger, because I didn't really get on very well with myself. I didn't really feel particularly, good about myself, and climbing was something where I could feel competent and involved and able to be with people. I was autistic. I was like a sort of autistic wild boy, you know. That's what I liked about Llanberis, really. That it was far enough away from laws and things that you could do what you wanted. You know, it's just the corner of the room, Llanberis, basically, where things go. You know, mice collect, dirt collects, coins are there, you know. All sorts of things are there that aren't in England, basically.
Paul Pritchard, Lancashire born, and lately Llanberis bred, leads the second ascent of his own route.
It's not cool to say you have heroes anymore, but fucking Paul Pritchard is up there in my hero kind of estimation. And he's like living on the dole and climbing full time and just going like, fuck you, like.
I found that I was very good at living in skips and eating out of bins and just dressing in rags. I mean, and when I came here, I didn't feel out of the ordinary because each of those criteria, like, I just found like a community of people that could best me on each of these things, you know.
You got slim because you couldn't afford to eat, not because you were on some keto diet or something. You know, ultimate, intermittent fasting. I know about all these things because I need to get fit, but Pritchard was probably the poorest of all and looked comically skinny as well. But I can remember we would distract people in Pete's seats, and then this Lancashire fork would come round and sort of take a sausage, you know.
The Pete's seats was like the Wild West. It was each man for himself.
There was a lot of rivalry, a lot of big egos, eh?
They're quite hard routes we were doing, but we weren't making a song and dance about it, no. We just enjoyed it. There was Jill Lawrence and Jill Price climbing, really hard climbs. They were breaking new ground abroad, but also climbing hard routes in North Wales, just going off and doing it. No, I don't think they made a big deal about it.
Okay. Do you get foot real high?
Yeah, you get it on like a rounded short.
What an ending! Fucking hell, it can be the best route in the world.
The 80s did sound a special time. Everyone was big in at the parties. There was a lot more free. There was less health and safety. Do you know what I mean? You could have like, you're less likely to get bollocked, for being a bit outlandish. And that's one thing I do like this area for. You can be a bit weird and strange and feel settled within North Wales.
Oh, Goff, don't be so hard on yourself.
It's all right, one day you might become a regular person.
Every era's got its own challenges and its own joy, and so I don't want to profess to think that it's any better than it is now or any better than the 70s and the Joe Brown era. It's just another era in a whole evolution.
I'm gonna attempt a rainbow recalcitrance. Route that I haven't done before, but it's been on my list for a long time. First done by John Sylvester, who's a bit of a legend around here and sadly passed away last year. It's like a nice little nod to him too.
Homage to John.
Yeah.
We climbed from our hearts. We did what we did. The quarrymen were on our side. The Welsh quarrymen were on our side against the corporate oppressors. You know, at last, the climbers, the micro quarrymen, were actually saying something against them. You know, they weren't just getting a meagre wage for eviscerating the flank of Lydia Vale.
In theory, I don't think slate should be beautiful because it's a mark of destruction. You know, it's a mark of industry too. But it is beautiful. I suppose there is beauty in damage sometimes.
In the Highlands of North Wales, there are several slate quarries, such as this one at Llanberis.
So the quarries were in the A-day, properly kicking off one of the biggest quarries in the world, in Ore Quarry, around the 1830s when the tariffs came off after the Napoleonic Wars.
At one point, it had such a vital part in the global sense. You know, its slate got shipped all over the world and provided a lot of, I mean, not very good employment, but provided a lot of employment for the local communities.
A lot of stuff would have been done, just gone unrecorded. You know, some of the quarrymen around here, I mean, you know, they would have been climbing, you know, in the quarries, basically, but a lot of what they've done is probably fallen down, you know, because they were hammering it about on big ropes just wrapped around the leg to, you know, fill shot holes full of gunpowder, and then they'd have a 3-minute fuse and run off into the blast shelters.
It's amazing how we see this place so differently to how the quarrymen would see it, because they came here every day from their late teens, you know, and broke their backs to bring this place up for little to no pay. Their friends died here, you know, and we think of it as this big playground because we're so privileged to be able to climb. I don't think like that.
You do forget that it's been through such a kind of transition over the years, from being a mountain to being this massive operation of work and industry, and being very political as well, to suddenly being quite empty and quiet, but then providing people with a different sense of joy. So I remember leading my first 6A in the slate. There's actually pictures of me doing it, and I'm wearing my primary school uniform still. So it must have been an after-school hit.
Do you know what? I think it was actually my first 6A as well.
Was it?
Yeah.
Check us out.
Yeah.
How old were we? Was it like a couple of months ago? It wasn't necessarily about the grade. This is my first memory of a route being something that I'd kind of aspired to do and then had to go through a little process to do it. So this was the first, I guess, my first little project. It is just such a nice route.
Flow is very nice,
Yeah,
isn't it?
like, it's just, it is a breath of fresh air.
Wow, look at you go.
There's definitely no preference for me in between like the different genres of climbing, I guess. What attracts me to them all is the kind of the different challenges and stuff you find for each one. I definitely find if I do too much of one, of like just trying really hard, I get a little bit like stumped in what I'm trying because I feel like I need to go and do something that requires a little bit more of the mental side, and then vice versa. If I do too much trad, then I tend to get like a little bit too mentally exhausted. I'm like, oh, I just need to go and clip some bolts. Slate's a funny one. I think It's super, super, super unique, and it just adds to the kind of diversity that we have here in North Wales. Okay.
And I think North Wales is fantastic. I always recommend, when people are thinking about moving here, I always recommend it. I think it's the best climbing in the world, for a variety of rock types and landscapes in a small area within a half-hour drive.
You've got the coast here, just 7 miles away from the highest mountain. It's all very accessible.
So we've just come along the coast to Lower Pentrwyn, which is on the Orme. So I've got my normal climbing stuff and all the drawers and the rope, and some water. And what have you got, Lewis?
I've got the style.
In your little rucksack? Yeah, because you're certainly not wearing it.
No, I'm not carrying anything. You're the strong one.
It doesn't feel particularly adventurous. You can go there for a few hours. You walk down from the road in like 10 minutes. But what it does provide is a place where you can test yourself physically. And yeah, from the like 80s and 90s, when it started getting developed, it was like one of the first major sport crags in the UK, and was kind of like the birth of like hard climbing as we see it.
You gonna send it first, go Zoe? Yeah. To here.
Totally bad, dude.
That's so tubular.
So you had people like Neil Carson putting up the Big Bang in a hard sport route in Wales. In 1990, you had Liquid Amber put up by Jerry Moffat a few years before. Ben Moon around 1993 or so, putting up Sea Tranquility. So some very hard sport routes getting set.
I think kind of the realm of what was possible grew significantly. Just the pure like physicalities of climbing and how hard people could climb kind of expanded so much during that era. I think people also just like suddenly realised what was possible with sport climbing. It was all based around trad climbing before that. But then also, you know, trad climbing's developed with better gear.
By the late 90s, 1997, 1998, you had people like Leo Holding and Patch Hammond operating here, and Leo was definitely a contender for the best bold trad climber in the world at that point. On technical bold stuff, he did some really outrageous stuff. Tim Emmett as well, so they all lived around here, and then they were going out to Yosemite, and nearly on site in El Nino was a really incredible effort.
I first met Leo when he was 14, and I mean, it was like one massive family. Being immersed in that world was definitely a big change for me, so yeah, it was amazing.
I just was getting into climbing at that point, doing the odd trip to Wales, so it was quite inspiring to see him operating, doing Lord of the Flies by a head torch when he was like 16.
We also climbed right wall in our trainers and big boots one day.
For me, Llanberis would come alight if everybody stopped using sticky boots, for example. And then everything would be hard enough to be interesting again. You could do the whole lot again.
We really enjoyed going on adventures and just generally mucking about and going to parties, and yeah, it was pretty fun, actually.
It's something else, when you're up with a team of friends, loud pumping music, lasers, in an interesting environment. It's amazing.
It was just really exciting. There would be after parties, and the after parties would go on, sometimes quite often till it was light, and you think, shit.
I enjoyed going to Pete's Eats in the 90s on our first trips here. I remember being hungover to sin as a 16-year-old and getting like some sort of fry-up.
So yeah, Pete's Eats was the legendary cafe where all the climbers hung out. And it had this book in there where anyone that did a new route, they'd put the name and the description of the route in the book. And that's how, the new route came to life. It was always fun reading people's comments. It's completely unedited information that really follows the character of the individuals that are doing these routes. And I remember always reading through the book and wondering if one day I was going to be able to write something up in there, and then that day came. And I remember thinking that it was like, wow, this is like, you know, this is a part of history.
Come on, for fuck's sake! Oh!
I was doing some of the harder routes in North Wales and starting to get pictures in magazines. And I was just like, hang on a second. Like, if I focus my time on doing new routes and getting photos, I can get paid the same as what I would do if I was working full time. And it'd be way more fun. So that's what I did. I definitely feel like I was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time, because if you go back to the era before me with like Johnny Dawes and Johnny Redhead and all those guys, they didn't have the same opportunities.
We've evolved from being lots of climbers climbing on the dole and not really employed to now being in this position where you can make a career out of it. And certainly in my field as a route setter, I feel like over my career, certainly, we can start to see it like developing to becoming more people's livelihoods and becoming more fulfilling.
Oh, it's so scary!
I think sport climbing and hard climbing is evolving, maybe at a faster rate because physically climbers are just getting better and better and better. But no, the trad climbing scene is definitely still going to carry on evolving, and especially somewhere like North Wales where it has so much to offer. You know, there's new routes going up all the time.
There's only one way it can develop, and that is people doing hard routes in really good style.
I feel like there's so many people who still have a adventurous philosophy towards climbing that it's not going anywhere anytime soon. It's just that maybe what the mainstream and broader audiences are looking for is in more of a sport context or a bouldering context. But just because it's not covered, it doesn't mean it's not there.
The more urban in approach climbing became, I think the more it became an international scene. It doesn't matter where you were still searching for the move instead of the spirit of the soul or you know, another value that climbing can give you when you go into it, you know, not in a farming sense, but in a kind of like in a hunter-gatherer sense is what I was trying to do.
I think being in the mountains is the crucial thing, and not just ticking your way up lists, which is really just, you know, capitalism and privilege geographised if you do that.
But I would imagine definitely around here, there's probably still clinging on to that. I'd rather go climbing outdoors and shuffle and scare myself a bit more than it. You know, there is a lot of training and serious people around as well, but I think hopefully Llanberis, I think, is still clinging on to that adventurous spirit, odd bod misfit.
Goff's great because it's wild in its own way, but completely different from the mountains or other coastline.
Yeah. Well, basically straight up, it's you can see there's like a dark streak, a bit of a scoop. It kind of just goes straight up there. It's a bit of an X factor why Goff is so special. It just kind of is. The climbing here is for climbers who look for more of a philosophical kind of questing in their climbing through a hunt for bolder things.
It's really spiritual stuff. And I think that Goff just seems to be, for me, a very spiritual place.
The whole time you're there with seal song, birds flying around you, waves rippling underneath.
For the time that you're out there, you simplify your life to just what you're doing, and you get absorbed in what you're doing.
You know, and it's just like the seals are looking up at you, and Nullstack Wall is like flaky and crumbly and like really risky with not a lot of gear.
I think what's interesting about this wall is that it's like a monument to an ethos of a different generation. It wasn't about how hard can I climb, it was about what's the daftest thing that I can get away with, which I think is just so brilliant.
Gripper. Gripper.
You cannot have adventure without risk, and risk is something so enigmatic nowadays in a world where everything is trying to be as safe as possible. But there's so much to be said for what risk can do to your outlook on life.
Thanks, Zoe. Probably there'll be only a handful of times in your life when you feel really connected and transcend kind of material reality, if you like. And at Gogarth, I actually did transcend my body and actually came out of my body and was because I was doing such dangerous climbs that oh my God, sorry. And I just came out of my body and but not just out of my body, actually felt myself being absorbed into the universe. For that one moment, I felt connected to everything.
That was cool.
And now I realised that was one of a handful of times that you get these experiences. and that's kind of what I've been searching for all my life ever since.
I really love climbing, and I adore the movement of it. I gain great satisfaction from bouldering and sport climbing, but the moments that have truly, really stuck with me have been those when I've had to dig somewhere deeper inside myself and find some kind of acceptance of the gamble that is proposed. And once you accept that, you gain this immaculate sense of freedom, which just stays with you and it makes you feel so alive.
Well, that was just such a good route. Oh.
Yeah, fun, eh?
Oh, so good. Nice one. Oh. Oh, it's hot up here, isn't it?
Just to do though.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you power screamed.
Yeah.
I've never heard you.
Have you not?
No.
Oh, I'm quite a vocal climber.
That was good.
Yeah.
Those moves are great because you just tap,
Yeah, right.
tap, tap,
Yeah,
tap.
exactly. Well, that's
and
the thing.
nothing's
It's like,
bad. You just have to like.
Up every other
You
move.
just kind of have to like do that.
Yeah, exactly.
That is some high quality North Wales climbing.
Proper good.
There is a handful of places, isn't there, around the globe where the actual spirit of climbing runs deep, but only a handful, and Llanberis is one of them.
I think the essence of what has always been here within the climbing community is still here.
It's all these people that are of a different generation as well that are still climbing so well. And, you know, a lot of them choose to hang around here, and they always have done.
Cloggie's just an amazing bottle of wine, an essence of the crag that never kind of leaves you. So talking about it is not so easy to do, but I feel it in myself. I'd like to, whatever you guys are going to do, I'll just tag along.
Cool, yeah.
You know, when you look at the youngsters now, you can see them getting the similar thing out of it that perhaps we all did 20, 30 years ago.
I was expecting you to wear your leopard print jacket, Johnny.
Do you guys look at us oldsters and think they don't really know what they're doing?
No.
Oh, we do all right.
You do all right.
Yeah, it's quite nice.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't like certain things about modern... I don't like all the slings people use. You don't need slings. You can just use the rope.
You get it all this.
Long sling. You know what I mean?
It is the bane of modern climbing, is slings.
You agree? The thing about Clog, it's had different generations of climbers have done their routes here. You know, Longland did stuff on the right-hand side. Joe Brown climbed the main weakness, Vember. And they didn't have much time off, so they used to just turn up, climb in the wet. You know, imagine back in the 50s trying that. That must have looked unbelievable. And he's in, you know, carbon rubber. He's got maybe 1 or 2 nuts on wire. He's got a few pegs and some slings. You know, he's up here with just maybe 2 or 3 fags and no more.
It's a serious crag, it's a big crag. It's got the rarity value. It's got to have good weather, it's got to be warm, it's got to have been dry for a while. So it's got that rarity of opportunity to climb up there, and that's partly what helps make these routes special, as well as the history that's been involved.
Cloggie was just an adventure playground.
Cloggie was like the cauldron, full of magical ingredients that test you, test the human soul, test who you are. What are you doing there? She's beautiful.
You wouldn't know how hard it was when Lewis was climbing it. Pretty hard's the answer. Thanks.
No worries.
I moved the rope at least to the side.
You were very pumped on it, you know. I don't want you to break your arm.
I was not very pumped. I wouldn't even say I was actually pumped, but yeah. No, I was not pumped. I was pumped once in 1983. I got pumped for about 2 minutes, and that's it. Yeah, it's funny. Just hanging around is what I like now. I'm not. The climbing almost feels incidental to me, funnily enough. I'm sure I could be in a place where that wouldn't be the case, but just now, just hanging out's as much fun as it's like all the climbing has allowed me to hang out and have fun, really, in the end. All rocks feel incredibly different, don't they?
They do.
Always thought up here is like, got a certain tone, hasn't it?
Yeah, the energy from the places.
I mean, actually, the vibration of this place here now doesn't feel scary to me. It feels really homely. I feel like I'm still at home.
It's like the mountains are your home here. I think there's still something quite sacred in the hills, in the mountains, in the granite, up in North Wales. It gives you space and breath and some kind of a hope and a spirit and the soul here.
I've got a very strong sense of place. I like this place. I just feel lucky that I was born here. And I was always outside having adventures, just pushing boundaries. Now I've got memories. I look out the window and I know the places really well. So I consider myself really lucky like that. It's my place, it's my valley, and I'm very proud of it.
I think when you've got so many people collected in one place that have the same appreciation for that place, that's what makes it so special. You feel emotionally drawn to the place.
They have a word in Welsh.
Iras, which is like a deep sense of longing, which any Welshman feels when they're away.
Even though I'm not from Wales, I'm from the Midlands, but I definitely feel that about coming home to Wales. Hiraeth.
And I live in Australia now, but coming back here, I just feel very warm and very much like I'm coming home every time I come back here. I guess because this is where my formative years were, and so it really does feel fantastic every time I'm back here.
I was travelling around the world for all around the world, and I used to class like Chamonix or Kathmandu or places in Canada as kind of like home. But for me, my home was always Llanberis. It's always the place I came back to, and always the place I loved coming back to. And I can't imagine anywhere else I would want to be than round here.
The sun is shining as the morning raven flies a wailing. Meanwhile I'm lying in the dew. If you go picking flowers, leave them for me after hours. That's when I'll be dreaming of you. The fire fills the night like ribbons breaking into light, and everything is winking in the dark. All the force of daytime has fed me like a mayfly, and I think I'm reigniting with a spark. And time has told me why everything is but a show, and death is an illusion, we never really go. The ground will consume us, the void will leave the earth. Nothing is forever, that's why it ain't worth it to worry.